What is going on with Bethesda? Despite a ton of excitement and hype coming out of the summer showcase, I think that Doom trailer blew just about everyone away, the company still finds itself in a pretty odd spot right now. Starfield reviews are plummeting, but also Fallout 4 has had a fairly game-breaking bug for nearly 2 months now, with very little movement from Bethesda to address that. And when looking at Bethesda game studios in general, some of their games are just in kind of odd or precarious spots right now, and it's not entirely clear what's gonna happen. I start at the bat, I personally find the current situation with Fallout 4 incredibly frustrating. From the onset, the next-gen update was a bit of a joke. Many PC users just flat out condemned this update outright, but for those on console, some of the FPS improvements brought to downtown Boston were genuinely game-changing, taking Fallout 4 from a laggy, constantly crashing mess to a far more stable and actually playable experience, particularly for those on the weaker Xbox Series S. The next-gen update basically made Fallout 4 a playable game for a lot of people. Sadly, that's kind of where the good news from this one ends, as even on release, this update had a ton of issues. Over time, of course, these issues were addressed with updates, but not all of them, because as of right now, 2.5 months after the next-gen update's release, Fallout 4 is still pretty broken. And arguably, Fallout 4 is a more broken game for many players compared to before this update. For console users right now, VATS is broken. You get these weird hit chances, so it'll go from 0 to the actual hit chance, but it can be really frustrating trying to actually lock these in, because when it's 0, it won't actually let you select that body part. But you can also just get straight up wall hacks while using VATS. If you like to explore by spamming the VATS key, you'll now be constantly locking onto enemies through walls. Unfortunately, these aren't true wall hacks. Your shots aren't going to actually penetrate this wall, you'll just hit the wall instead. If you're playing in the next-gen version and download any mod that edits NPCs, or perhaps more specifically, their face-gen data, your game will now stutter. So now, yeah, this is a fairly extreme example. This is definitely the most exaggerated version of this problem, but you can still clearly see here. One side has the face-gen data edited, while the other just has a bunch of NPCs, and while both definitely have lower FPS, one is basically unplayable due to the lag and stutters, while the other is just lower FPS, but otherwise relatively stable. So right now, if you're playing Fallout 4 on the next-gen version, the more mods you have that are affecting or editing NPCs, the worse these stutters can get. And you can find online tons of videos and months of reports of fans having this issue. But right now, there's nothing you can do except delete a bunch of your mods. But editing NPCs is fairly common. I mean, even the unofficial patch will do this, so you'd have to clear out a large chunk of your load order to get rid of these stutters. And that's all assuming you can even access your mods, because also for those on consoles, the mod menu or individual mod pages will often not work. The operation could not be completed error is even more prevalent than some of these other issues, as this is a two-pronged problem. Some will get this error when just trying to access individual mod pages, like just clicking on one mod in this menu, but you can mostly get around that just by restarting your console or restarting Fallout 4. And the far more egregious version is some users can't access the mod menu at all. Clicking the menu button will trigger this error, and it's due to some mods being deleted. So if you have a mod installed for the game that has since been removed from Bethesda.net, well, sorry, you can't actually access your mods menu anymore. The working solution as of right now is to just delete all of your mod data. That includes the broken ones, so you can access the menu again, but it also includes all of the working ones, so you have to manually reinstall every single mod. And obviously, if you're using a save game that actually requires that broken mod that you now have to delete, you can't really delete it because you might risk breaking your save game. This too is absolutely brutal because these are new issues. Mods being deleted but still in your load order only became a problem after the next gen update. The NPC stutter issue only came up after the next gen update. This was not a thing before this update. And like, yeah, sure, it's Bethesda, sometimes things are broken with an update. But in this particular situation, I feel like this is an egregious one. This next gen update dropped 2.5 months ago, and even the more recent update to Fallout 4 was on May 13th, nearly 2 months ago. So Bethesda Game Studios is just letting these problems exist in what is currently their most popular game for literal months at this point. And yeah, I would consider this stutter issue pretty game-breaking for a lot of people. And there is some insane irony here. Fallout 4 has a ton of bugs. If you have weapon debris enabled, you can just crash your game by shooting things. The next-gen update didn't address any of those lingering issues, but it did implement a bug that happens if you use the unofficial patch. So for a lot of players right now, if you're playing on the next-gen version, you have to pick between using community mods that fix issues but now create a stutter, or deal with the issues that are still there but you don't have a stutter. It's either broken or broken. That's the main reason that many PC players are just downgrading to the old version of the game and not messing with the next-gen update at all. And based off of the way things are trending right now, I wouldn't be surprised if the PC modding scene just never moves to the next-gen version. A ton of really important mods were never updated for next-gen. So now, those updates still could happen, but it's been several months months, and we're not really getting close or anything. For me, I'm not even considering moving my main load order to next-gen Fallout 4. There's just no reason to it. I have to cut out a ton of mods. So often we see these memes around Bethesda games specifically about how an update is one step forward but two steps back. Lots of times this is pure hyperbole, but with next-gen Fallout 4, I almost think this may hold true. Some of the important changes were definitely made, especially for console users, but the sheer amount of brokenness and general user frustration that has come from this next-gen update are seriously making me question if it was worth it overall. Also, one of the pretty surprising situations we find ourselves in now is that Fallout 4 is the largely problematic game, while Fallout 76 has been thriving lately, and even the next update coming later this year to Fallout 76 looks incredible. But we also have this big unknown with Starfield. Is Starfield going to recover? Starfield finds itself in this unfortunate situation where, despite having tons of really solid parts and even some really interesting and fun quests, it didn't really connect with the broader gaming audience, and even just with Bethesda Game Studios fans. Despite a record-breaking launch, Starfield is now one of the least played games out of the newer Bethesda releases. On Xbox, just Skyrim has less players than Starfield. Both Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 are above it, and on Steam, it's the least played out of these games by a considerable margin. And perhaps even worse than that, on Steam right now, Starfield reviews are mixed overall, with recent reviews being mostly negative. 74% of the new Starfield reviews from the past month are negative right now. Nearly 2/3 of people are saying don't play this game or have something bad to say about this game. And that's of course after 6 months of updates and mod support being added. Most of this negativity comes from the recent paid mods implementation, but just generally, the game only has 57% positive reviews overall. That means nearly 70,000 negative reviews have been left for Starfield on Steam. A lot of people just didn't connect with this one. We just recently had some of the most exciting updates for Starfield yet. A variety of fixes and changes were added in 2024, and of course, mod support came just about a month ago in early June. But even with the release of official mod tools, the player count only went from a 6,000 average to a 7,000 average. Now of course, it takes months or even years for some of those really cool mods to come out, but I personally was expecting a larger bump after 6 months of updates and mod tools finally being here. It felt like this was kind of the moment a lot of us were waiting for people to temporarily return to Starfield, but not that many people did. And after speaking with several authors who have been using some of these new tools, while they were definitely upgraded compared to Fallout 4 and Skyrim, and many authors are very excited for some of the possibilities, there's also quite a few issues with Starfield's mod tools right now. Lip sync files aren't working properly, creating new points of interest can currently only be done by one mod at a time, you can't actually update creations, so you're going to need to delete them and then reinstall them to update, and even new stuff like creating planets is incredibly difficult to the point of basically being impossible right now. And just overall, there's not a ton of interest in Starfield. My dedicated Starfield videos don't do super well unless they're negative, and many creators have the exact same issue. And even in online discussions, Starfield doesn't come up all that much unless it's negativity about the game. During the recent interview with Mr. Matty Plays, Todd Howard began to lay out the long-term plans for Bethesda games and how they're making this wait between games easier. This is starting with Starfield. We see smaller bits of official content getting added via the paid mod system known as Creations. Bethesda added in the Trackers Alliance faction more properly with their more recent update, and while this does feature one free quest, there's also one for sale, among a variety of other paid mods Bethesda has released themselves. And even just this past week, even more paid mods were added to Starfield by Bethesda, as you can now buy a $3 skin pack to add desert camo to some of your weapons. These paid mods haven't been going over super well, but that's only one part of Bethesda's longer term strategy, as the even more exciting part is Bethesda's desire for more expansions. As Todd Howard said, they want to do yearly expansions for Starfield.
You know, content-wise, we're looking at kind of like what we do with Far Harbor on Fallout 4. We're like, okay, this is a scope that works for, you know, our development in doing this kind of annual story expansion type of thing. So really excited about that. And it lets us, you know, kind of do some things the way we would in previous games.
I know things change, but would you say you're aiming to do like an annual story expansion every year?
I would say we want to, more or less, yeah. How long that continues, hopefully a very long time, but we're planning for the one after this, so there will be another one.
And doing this for as long as people play them is a pretty big deal. Over time, this could yield a ton more content coming out from Bethesda, but there is one big issue. Will people actually play these? Many aspects of this new plan from Bethesda get me really excited. There's a near endless amount of cool expansion content that they can do, but it feels like due to where Starfield stands right now, fans may simply reject some of this post-launch support. It was the biggest launch of any Bethesda game ever, but are people coming back? The big test will be with Shattered Space later this year, but personally, I'm really questioning if fan interest will return. Looking at Google Trends for 2024, Starfield searches have been passed by both Fallout 76 and even Skyrim at this point. And even just looking at the new Shattered Space trailer on IGN's page, it has less views than the Fallout 76 trailer, the new Avowed trailer, and significantly lower views than both Doom and Indy. I'm looking at IGN because sometimes the official Xbox or Bethesda pages will run the trailers as ads, which will skew the view count considerably. IGN is just uploading these trailers after they debut at the showcase, and Starfield is simply not putting up the numbers it did previously. And for me, this really sucks. I'm personally incredibly excited for Shattered Space and honestly want to be making more Starfield content, but the interest simply isn't there right now. And I do have this feeling with Shattered Space that things will branch in one of two ways. Either Starfield will make a healthy comeback as the DLC lands with fans, or maybe people have already moved on, and the player count may just continue to dwindle, merely seeing a temporary bump around the release of Shattered Space. It's one of those weird situations where I'm genuinely having a hard time gauging if people will even be interested in this one. I feel like it's one of those expansions that Bethesda really needs to knock out of the park. But at the same time, let's not forget, Starfield itself was a critical success. The game got very good to potentially even great reviews. It's on the fan side where things slid. So Shattered Space will have this unique challenge of really needing to win back quite a few Starfield fans. Although, thankfully, many of you already own this since you already bought the premium edition, so the fact that you're getting the expansion for free should seriously help with player counts. But at least in my opinion, if Starfield's player count remains somewhere around here, I can't imagine Bethesda is going to continue with their plan for yearly expansions for this title. It might simply not be worth it. But then we also have this somewhat curious situation with no proper release dates for anything. From Bethesda alone, we know we are getting Shattered Space, Indiana Jones, and a new Fallout 76 Milepost Zero DLC this year. But as of right now, none of these things have release dates. For Milepost Zero, this isn't super surprising. It just went into testing on the public test server, and Bethesda doesn't normally drop Fallout 76 release dates this far in advance. But when it comes to Shattered Space specifically, this is a pretty odd one to me. We heard from Tom Warren in the past that Shattered Space was targeting September, while Indiana Jones was targeting December. So perhaps the plan is just to have a bunch of release date trailers at Gamescom, but if Shattered Space is truly coming in September, Gamescom would only really give you about a month or so heads up on its release. Could it be that these games are actually slated for a bit later in the year, with a possibility that Indy gets pushed to 2025? Bethesda already has the developer direct in early 2025, so it wouldn't really shock me that much to see it pushed to Q1 or Q2. And this really isn't a commentary one way or another. It's not necessarily a bad thing to not have release dates for these games. I was just genuinely surprised by this. I thought there was definitely going to be a Shattered Space release date because Bethesda does that almost every year. E3 is when we get the dates for stuff, but for some reason this year they didn't do that. But then of course, the last two big games that many fans have been asking about is what happened to that Fallout 3 remaster and the Oblivion remaster, potentially even remake. It seems like many fans were hoping or perhaps even expecting a Fallout 3 remaster at the summer showcase, which was very surprising to me. Even before the showcase, I cautioned in some videos that that's pretty unlikely. In my eyes, the Oblivion remaster is a lot more likely, and even that had a pretty high likelihood of not being there. Both of these remasters popped up on an internal Bethesda roadmap that was made all the way back in 2020, but it leaked last year during a court case. This roadmap was supposed to remain private, but this is about as legit as it gets when it comes to a leak, as it was literally a Microsoft lawyer to accidentally leak this one. It lays out several years of games, including both an Oblivion and Fallout 3 remaster. We separately heard last summer on a Reddit leak about an Oblivion remaster being worked on by Virtuous Games, and very importantly, that Reddit post around an Oblivion remaster was before this roadmap came out, which makes me seriously believe that this Reddit post is real. So despite this roadmap being about 4 years out of date, we do have some secondary sources saying that this game will happen, and specifically they said it could come in 2025 if it ends up being a more full-scale remake. So to me, it seems entirely plausible that this was never going to be at the showcase since it's a 2025 game. It could even pop up later this year at the Game Awards with a debut trailer, a deeper dive at the developer direct in January, and then a March release to celebrate the 19-year anniversary of Oblivion. Or maybe it comes even later in the year, just going to be at next year's showcase, or maybe it doesn't come at all. Technically, it's just a rumored game right now. And the same holds true for this Fallout 3 remaster. This was always a further out game, so it's really not all that surprising that we haven't heard anything about it yet. Most of the the games on this roadmap were delayed for one reason or another, so this could have been delayed also. And as things stand right now, we find Bethesda in a bit of an interesting situation. Their games are having some problems and definitely require their attention, but they also have the potential to really have a ton of success later into 2024 and even 2025. Shattered Space could knock it out of the park later this year, along with Indie truly delivering, and then potentially seeing this Oblivion remake come in early 2025 or just 2025 in general. I can really see a Bethesda high beginning later this year and continuing into 2025. But they have a ton of really exciting stuff just on the horizon. But at the same time, if some of these problems aren't addressed in the interim, I could definitely see fan feedback going even more negative. Although, if you're interested in some more Bethesda content, check out this video to see the incredibly ambitious plans Bethesda has for their future, according to Todd Howard.